You know how everyone's talking about this whole biological age thing lately?
Mhm.
Like, are we actually older or younger than our driver's license says?
Right. It's definitely a hot topic.
Yeah, so today we're going to really dig into this article by M. Arfan Ikram. It's
Hmm.
in Nature Medicine, and it's called The Use and Misuse of Biological Aging in Health Research.
Okay.
So get this. He basically says all these biological clocks we're obsessed with,
Right.
they might be kind of leading us down the wrong path.
That's right. There's a lot of hype around biological age these days, and for good reason. I mean, we all know people who seem to age gracefully while others, well, not so much.
Yeah, totally.
But what Ikram's arguing is that maybe we're putting too much stock in these clocks. Maybe they're not the be-all and end-all we think they are.
Okay, so let's break this down.
Yeah.
We've got all these clocks using things like DNA methylation or like, metabolic markers to say, hey, this is how old you are.
Hmm.
And then they compare that to your actual age. But Ikram makes this super interesting point. Like the whole point of these clocks is that they're not perfect.
Exactly.
Uh,
A perfect clock would be useless, right? If it predicted our age with 100% accuracy, it wouldn't tell us anything new.
yeah, to just be like, yep, you're 40, surprise.
Exactly. And on the other hand, a completely random clock would be just as bad.
True.
So it's that gap, that discrepancy between the predicted age and the actual age that we're all interested in. But the big question is, how do we know if that gap really reflects, true biological aging or just some random noise in the data?
It's like, are we measuring something real or are we just measuring, I don't know, static? And then Ikram takes it even further and it's like, whoa, mind blown, right?
Yeah.
He asks, is aging itself, whether it's by the calendar or these biological clocks, is it actually a cause of disease?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it?
Yeah.
And Ikram uses a really interesting analogy to explain his point.
Okay, I'm intrigued.
He compares calendar age to something called a propensity score. So imagine you're a researcher studying heart disease, and you've got all this data on people, their age, what they eat, their genes, all that stuff.
Gotcha.
A propensity score basically takes all that information and boils it down to a single number, kind of like a snapshot of their risk.
Okay, so it's like saying, hey, based on everything we know about you, this is how likely you are to have a heart attack.
Exactly. But here's the key. You wouldn't say someone got heart disease because of their propensity score, right?
Right.
That score is just a reflection of the underlying causes, like smoking or a bad diet, things like that.
Yeah, the things they actually did, not just the score.
Exactly. And Ikram suggests that aging might work the same way.
So instead of saying, oh, they got sick because they're 70, it's more like, well, what happened during those 70 years that actually made them more likely to get sick?
Exactly. It's not the age itself, but the baggage we accumulate along the way.
Okay, so it's less about the years and more about like what you did with those years, kind of like, I don't know, two cars from the same model year, right?
Mm-hmm.
One's been babied, the other's been, driven hard and put away wet.
Yeah. One might be a clunker and the other one pristine, even though they're technically the same age.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And then Vikram throws in this whole other concept, stochastic variation. Have you heard of this?
Oh, absolutely. It's a fascinating idea. Basically, it means that random stuff happens in our bodies all the time.
Like just random things going wrong.
Yeah, like random mutations in our DNA or damage to our cells from, just everyday wear and tear.
Okay, that makes sense.
And over time, all those random events add up. It's like rolling the dice over and over again. Eventually, you're going to roll some bad numbers.
So are you saying that even these fancy biological clocks might just be measuring like all the random bad luck we've accumulated, not some actual aging process?
That's exactly what Ikram is suggesting. He's saying that there might not be a specific biological program driving aging itself, but rather it's just the accumulation of all this randomness.
Wow, this is really making me rethink everything. So if these clocks aren't necessarily what we thought they were, where do we go from here? Like, what should we be focusing on instead?
That's a great question, and it's exactly what we'll be exploring next. Ikram actually offers some concrete recommendations for how we can shift our focus from just measuring age to actually understanding what causes age-related diseases.
Okay, now I'm even more curious. Let's dive into those recommendations. Okay, so if we're not supposed to be like freaking out about getting our biological age down, what does this Ikram guy say we should be doing?
Well, he's basically saying, look, instead of just trying to slow down the clock, what if we focused on figuring out what actually causes age-related diseases? Like, what are the mechanisms behind them?
So it's not about like fighting time itself, but more about I don't know, making sure that the time we do have is good quality time.
That's a great way to put it. It's about maximizing what's called health span, the years you live in good health, not just the total number of years, period.
Yeah, who wants to live to be 100 if you're miserable the whole time?
Exactly. Wouldn't it be amazing if we could all live long lives, but also, like, actually enjoy those extra years?
Okay, sign me up for that. But how do we get there? Like, if we're ditching this idea of, one single biological clock, where do we even start?
That's where things get really interesting. Ikram suggests that instead of looking for this, like, magic bullet to aging, we need to think about it more personally. It's about understanding what you specifically have been exposed to throughout your life. Remember those two 70-year-olds we were talking about?
The one who chain smoked and the one who,
Mhm.
lived in a yoga studio. Yeah, I remember.
Right. They highlight how much our lifestyle choices actually matter. Things like diet, exercise, stress, pollution, even your genes, all of that contributes to your own personal risk of disease.
So even if we can't control, Father Time himself, we can control what we do with the time we're given.
Absolutely. And this is where those biological clocks might actually still be useful, just maybe not the way we originally thought.
What will say?
Even if they aren't perfect measures of aging itself, they can still be really good for, like, feedback. Imagine tracking your biological age as you make changes to your lifestyle.
Ooh, like if you start eating better and exercising and suddenly your biological age starts going down, that'd be pretty motivating.
Exactly. It'd be like a personalized report card showing you the impact of your choices. But here's another thought. If we're not so hung up on this idea of aging as the enemy, how does that change how we think about older people in society?
That's a good point. I mean, if it's not about just living longer, but living better for longer, maybe we start to value older adults more for their experience and wisdom.
Right. It's about shifting our mindset from, like, dreading getting old to appreciating the potential of a longer life.
So instead of fear, it's like opportunity.
Exactly. And who knows, maybe that shift in perspective will unlock all sorts of possibilities we haven't even thought of yet.
Okay, now my brain is officially buzzing. What kind of possibilities are we talking about here? Like, could we actually, radically extend human lifespan and stay healthy?
That's pushing the limits of what we know right now, but honestly, if we can really crack the code on what causes age-related diseases, who knows what's possible?
This is getting kind of sci-fi, but I like it. So for our listeners who are, just starting to wrap their heads around this whole new way of thinking about aging, what's the main takeaway?
I'd say don't stress too much about those biological clocks. They're interesting, but they're not the whole picture. Focus on what you can control: your lifestyle, your environment, how you think about aging.
So it's not about stopping the clock, but about making the most of the time we have. Any final thoughts before we wrap up?
Just this: the science of aging is constantly changing. What we know today could be totally different tomorrow. So stay curious, keep asking questions, and don't be afraid to challenge what you think you know about aging.
That's great advice. We're all in this together, and the more we understand about aging, the better off we'll all be. It really is wild to think that, we're still figuring out something as basic as aging.
It definitely shows you how much we still don't know.
Yeah, for sure. And this is where Ikram's whole point about, focusing on what causes these age-related diseases
Right.
becomes so important. Because if we can unlock those secrets, then who knows? Maybe we can all live longer and healthier.
Exactly. If we can figure out the mechanisms behind these diseases, we could potentially extend health span by decades.
It's like we were so focused on the clock itself that we forgot to look at all the gears and springs that make it work.
That's a great analogy. And if we understand those gears, then maybe we can find ways to, keep them running smoothly for much longer.
So it's not about just tacking on more years at the end. It's about making those years actually good years.
It's about quality, not just quantity. Like, imagine a world where turning 80 or 90 isn't about decline, but it's like a whole new chapter.
That would be amazing. There's
Yeah.
a total mind shift, right?
Yeah.
Instead of being scared of getting older, we could be excited about it.
Exactly. Imagine all the amazing things people could accomplish if they had, like, decades more of healthy, active life.
Wow, this whole conversation has been a real eye-opener for me. I feel like I was pretty caught up in the whole biological age thing, but now I see it's just one small part of a much bigger picture.
It's easy to get caught up in the hype, especially with all the talk about, like, reversing aging and living forever. But sometimes you need to step back and, like, really question those assumptions.
Yeah, it's like instead of being afraid of time passing, we should be focused on making the most of the time we have. right?
Absolutely.
And using what we know to live better, healthier lives. And hey, maybe along the way, we'll discover some of those amazing possibilities you were talking about.
That's what's so exciting about science. There's always something new to discover. And who knows, maybe what we learn today will lead to incredible breakthroughs in the future.
Well, I think that's a great place to wrap things up. Deep divers, we hope this episode has given you a fresh perspective on aging. It's not about stopping the clock, it's about making each tick count. Thanks for joining us, and we'll see you next time for another deep dive.